Welcome to Gair am Air training, a programme that introduces the language immersion method. Although this method of establishing Welsh as the language of the Cylchoedd Meithrin has been central to the work and mission of the Mudiad Meithrin from the beginning, it is beneficial for us to ensure that the message is relayed again and that we're constantly reminded of it. No one is expected to understand the message unless it is shared and passed on. What is the immersion method? It's a method of introducing a second language to young children. The term derives from the ideas of the 50s and 60s, when there was an increase in the number of ysgolion meithrin, which in time became Cylchoedd Meithrin, that were interested in the best way of providing for children from non-Welsh-speaking homes. This method means that the children hear nothing but Welsh from the adults at the Cylch Meithrin. The immersion method is the best way of giving young children who won't acquire the Welsh language at home the opportunity to become Welsh speakers. And this is the most suitable method for nursery-aged children as they are already in the busy process of understanding, acquiring, and making sense of language. What is the immersion method, or dull trochi in Welsh? This is a successful method because it makes the most of young children's skills as they understand and develop language. When it comes to a second language in early childhood, the process is very similar to the process of acquiring a first language. The immersion method is therefore firmly based on knowledge of how young children acquire language. The global expert on bilingualism, Professor Colin Baker, formerly of Bangor University, says, "The focus is on the content, not the form of the language. It is the task at hand that is central, not conscious language learning." This is a very important point, that the child's time at the Cylch is not an opportunity for a language lesson. Rather, it's an opportunity to establish the type of language that a small child would hear at home. The immersion method has distinct features. Here are the guidelines. Adults use Welsh, the target language, with every child in the Cylch Meithrin. They also understand and respond to the language the child uses, which is usually English. The adults use Welsh together in the Cylch Meithrin, as well as use Welsh with children outside the Cylch Meithrin. Adults use a range of tactics and learning strategies such as play, music, singing, and dance, which is consistent with good practice. Adults also respond to clues, as well as use a range of gestures and body cues to convey messages and meanings. Adults will never force a child to use Welsh and never correct the child's language. Some of these guidelines can cause concern or doubt, but in reality, they are easy to implement. In the next slide, you will see and hear this conversation between Daniel, aged 3, and Delith, the leader of the Cylch. Note that Delith does not correct, but instead offers the creative counterpoint. That is, she uses the child's language to confirm the target language.
I want the other car. Wyt ti eisiau'r car arall? Yes, I want that car. Iawn, dyma'r car i ti. Dyma'r car arall. I've got loads of the melon ones, more than Joe. Melon cars for me and coch cars for Joe. Oes, mae gen ti lawer o geir melyn, mwy na Joe. Mae gen ti geir melyn ac mae gan Joe geir coch.
Running a cylch meithrin requires very special skills and, among them, the ability to use the face, body and voice to convey meaning. For example, gestures, moving the body, using the arms and hands, and moving the head. It can also mean modifying the voice by varying tone, intonation and strength. For example, speaking quietly or loudly. How would you convey these without using words? Everyone quiet. I feel sad. Do you want a drink? I'm tired. Need the tea bach? I don't like. Enthusiasm. This activity emphasises and makes us appreciate the importance of using non-verbal messages. Take a look at the next slide to see a few examples. Why the immersion method? Y dull trochi. The success of this method is based on the basic fact that children are effective and clever learners. In the 3 to 4 years since they were born, they have already come to understand and use many complex language elements. The immersion method makes the most of the child's age, the child's linguistic skills, the child's huge motivation to learn more about the world, and the child's great interest in play. The research literature suggests that children who acquire a second language, whatever the language may be, are likely to go through certain stages. Not every child will experience each stage, and they won't necessarily go through the stages in order either. But, overall, here is an outline of the process. Stage 1. Some call this the silent period. During this period, a small child may ignore the adult who is speaking with him in Welsh. This may be linked to the change of environment. After all, the cylch meithrin itself is a strange place where there are new people, new children, new objects, and a new order. Everything is new. It can also correspond to that period in the baby's language development, between birth and around 1 year of age, when the baby listens, stares, and looks before language begins. This is the pre-verbal period. Watch the next slide.
Helo, Mia. Sut wyt ti? Tyd efo Aunty Anna I chwarae. Beth am chwarae yn y tywod? Edrych, mae'r bwced yn llawn tywod. 1, 2, 3. Hwrê! Castell tywod.
Step 2 is rejecting. Sometimes the young child will say something like, "Don't say that. Say it properly." A young child from a bilingual home will sometimes say something like, "Don't say melon, it's a mummy word." This may cause concern about the child's welfare and make us question whether we are ignoring the child's wishes. It's possible to deal with responses like this in a sensitive and fun way by drawing the child's attention to an activity he enjoys. We can do that without relying on language, for example by saying "Okay te" and then clapping our hands, smiling and leading the child carefully to his favourite type of play. Watch the next slide. What would be the best way to respond?
It's not tywod, it's sand.
Step 3 is first use. The child will often use the Welsh language in ritual activities in the Cylch Meithrin, for example using rhymes when tidying, singing and imitating puppets. It can also be in response to the adult's language, as we see in this conversation on the screen between Daniel and Delith. Some call this a tolerant second language, but in reality, there's nothing tolerant about it. Daniel commits to the target language and is very active in the conversation. Remember, understanding and responding to language is a very positive sign that the acquisition process is underway. Watch the conversation between Daniel and Delith on the next slide.
Hello, Daniel. Sut wyt ti? I'm fine. Wyt ti'n mynd I chwarae gyda'r ceir? No, I put the cars away.
Step 4 is spontaneous use. This is the stage when adults should shout a big hooray. This is when the young child gives it a go. It's an extremely significant step. You will now hear examples of the type of language we will have heard very often in the Cylch Meithrin, and yet we may not have appreciated how significant this step is.
My daddy's reado'r paper. Mrs Davies yn pleio'r piano. Mae rhy gormod o nhw. Are we going to canu ar y mat?
Consider what kind of language you have heard in the Cylch Meithrin. Discuss some examples. During this session, we have understood what the immersion method is, understood the characteristics of the immersion method, outlined the steps towards early bilingualism, and understood why the immersion method is effective with young children. Here's an opportunity now for reflection, either individually or as a team. Think about the children in your Cylch Meithrin. Within their development, where are they on their journey towards bilingualism? What are the signs that suggest this? This is the end of part 1. Go on to part 2.